I had barely spoken 10 words since entering that courtroom. The others chattered nervously while waiting for their cases to be called, but I just sat there, hands folded, eyes down, like I had done in hundreds of other places before. I was used to blending in. That was the whole point. You don't spend years investigating federal corruption by making noise. But Judge Randall Pierce didn't appreciate silence. "Mr. Ellis," he said, loud enough for the gallery to hear, "is there a reason you're acting like this courtroom is a monastery? You do realize you're in my house now, right?" There were a few scattered laughs. I looked up slowly. He was smirking. His gavel rested in one hand, the other perched on his cheek like he was bored and irritated at once. My public defender leaned over. "Don't respond. Just let him get through it." I didn't need the advice. I had dealt with bigger egos than this man's, and much darker secrets. But something about Judge Pierce's tone made my instincts twitch. The kind of twitch that had saved my life in places where rules didn't apply. "Just here for traffic court," I said plainly. That was true, technically. An unregistered plate from a borrowed car. Harmless. But Judge Pierce didn't let it go. "You know," he said, chuckling as he read from his screen, "I've had teenagers with less attitude than you. What's your story, Ellis? Couldn't afford registration, or just thought you were above the law?" I smiled lightly, barely. He had no idea how far above him I really was. The courtroom's laughter faded as the judge moved on to the next case, but I caught him still glancing my way now and then, like he couldn't shake the itch that I wasn't quite what I appeared to be. He wasn't wrong. "Mr. Ellis," my court-appointed attorney whispered, "don't give him anything. He's known for baiting defendants, especially the ones he thinks won't push back." I nodded. I'd already profiled Judge Randall Pierce long before I stepped inside his courtroom. Elected twice, he ran his bench like a kingdom. Rumors floated around federal circles, whispers of pay-to-play deals, dismissed evidence for friends, and mysteriously reassigned prosecutors. But none of it stuck. Until now. This wasn't about a traffic ticket. This was the final thread of a much larger operation I'd been working off the books, buried behind layers of misdirection. And now I was sitting here, pretending to be some quiet, broke guy from nowhere, when in truth, I had a classified clearance and a locked file sitting in Langley with his name on it. "Next case," Judge Pierce barked. "Back to Mr. Ellis. Let's resolve this quickly, shall we?" He clearly wanted a moment to reassert his control. His mistake. "I'd like to speak for myself," I said, standing calmly. His eyes narrowed. "Well now." The silent one found his voice. I kept my gaze steady. "Actually, sir, I've been listening. Closely." The courtroom quieted again. Even the bailiff paused. I reached into my coat, not quickly, and pulled out a slim, leather-bound folder. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. Because the emblem on the front was enough. Central Intelligence Agency. For a moment, the entire courtroom froze, like someone had shut off the air. Judge Pierce squinted at the folder in my hand. His voice dropped an octave. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Mr. Ellis?" I took a step forward. Not aggressive. Just enough to ensure he got a clear look at the seal. "I'm doing exactly what I was assigned to do," I said. "Observe. Record. Confirm." Pierce's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing. That could be a prop." I smiled faintly. "You know what I think, Your Honor. I think deep down, you recognize that it's not." Behind me, someone whispered audibly, "Is this real?" I laid the folder gently on the prosecution table. No rush. No theatrics. Just the calm, deliberate presence of someone who had waited for this exact moment for over a year. The judge looked at the bailiff, then at the clerk. Everyone seemed caught between curiosity and fear. "This isn't about a license plate," I continued. But you already know that. You recognized me the moment I walked in. I saw it in your face. He didn't deny it. Because he had recognized me. Not personally, but from a document he wasn't supposed to have seen, a classified brief outlining an internal sweep of corruption within state judicial ranks. My name wasn't listed, but my alias was. Pierce swallowed hard. This is highly irregular, I cut him off, gently. So is dismissing evidence for a contractor who funneled campaign money to your brother-in-law's firm. His face turned a shade paler. Would you like me to continue? I asked. He didn't answer. The silence in the courtroom felt like pressure building in a sealed container, every second tighter, heavier. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Judge Pierce adjusted in his seat, grasping the edges of his bench as if it could anchor him. You're out of line, he said, though his voice had lost its edge. This is traffic court. I will not tolerate theatrics. I stepped closer to the bench. Calm. In control. Neither will the Office of Internal Review, I replied. They're watching this, by the way. Multiple feeds. One of them's linked to the U.S. Attorney's Office right now. His eyes darted around the courtroom, to the wall-mounted camera, to the audience, to the plain-faced man in the back row who looked too stiff to be just another spectator. He finally spoke in a lower, more deliberate tone. You're saying this is, what? A sting? No, I said, placing both hands behind my back. That was 3 months ago. This is the final confirmation. You passed every test, or failed them, depending on how you look at it. Mr. Ellis, he said, voice trembling slightly now, this is absurd. I want your credentials, now. I nodded. I turned slowly toward the gallery, gave the briefest signal with 2 fingers down at my side, a cue prearranged for exactly this moment. The courtroom doors opened. 2 men and 1 woman entered silently, wearing dark suits, not uniforms. The lead agent walked with authority only those in the federal field truly recognized. They didn't need to show badges. Their faces were enough. Judge Pierce looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 seconds. I turned back toward him. Credentials incoming, Your Honor. Judge Pierce's lips parted, but no words came out. The lead federal agent walked up to the front with practiced confidence and handed over a folder, thicker than mine, stamped with a federal seal. Per Directive 7.3b, this court session is now under federal jurisdiction, he announced firmly. All proceedings are being recorded and logged for internal judicial review. The bailiff instinctively took a step back. Pierce blinked, gripping the arms of his chair. This is my courtroom. Not anymore, the agent said flatly. Effective immediately, you're being relieved of your judicial duties pending investigation. The clerk gasped. Someone in the gallery dropped their phone. I turned and nodded to the other 2 agents. One walked behind the bench while the other produced a simple manila envelope from inside her blazer. She placed it directly in front of Judge Pierce. A list. Names, dates, amounts. It was everything. Every deal, every dismissed charge, every payout. Pierce didn't touch it. He just stared at the top of the document, where his own name sat, typed cleanly above a line that read, Judicial Corruption, Priority Target Number 3, he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You were never here for the ticket, he said quietly. I shook my head. I was here for you. And then, gently, as the lead agent placed a hand on his shoulder, I added, you mocked the wrong man, Your Honor. As the agents guided Judge Pierce from the bench, the courtroom was so silent you could hear his shoes scrape the marble floor. His black robe hung heavy, no longer a symbol of authority but a costume being taken off mid-performance. People in the gallery watched in stunned disbelief, some with wide eyes, others shaking their heads slowly, as if processing the reversal of power in real time. I stayed where I was, hands behind my back, composed. I'd seen warlords fall in foreign courts, CEOs crumble behind closed doors, but there was something especially gratifying, and tragic, about watching a judge fall in his own courtroom. "Do I have the right to an attorney?" Pierce muttered to the lead agent. "You do," the agent said. "And we suggest you use one who hasn't donated to your last campaign." As he was led past the defense table, Pierce turned his head slightly toward me, not in defiance, but in something closer to shame. For all his arrogance earlier, he didn't say another word. Once the doors closed behind them, murmurs erupted like a dam breaking. The public defender leaned over to me. "Who are you?" I offered a thin smile. "Just a man with a ticket." She blinked, unsure if I was joking. I didn't clarify. The presiding agent approached me. "Ellis, your role here's complete. Debrief at 0900. I nodded. "Copy that." He extended his hand. "Nicely done." "Wasn't about doing it nicely," I said. "It was about making it undeniable." By the time I exited the courthouse, the whispers had already begun spilling into the street. Reporters stood across the plaza with cameras half raised, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. Someone must have tipped them off, maybe even one of ours. It didn't matter. This part was meant to be public. Pierce's arrest wasn't just about removing a corrupt judge. It was about sending a signal to the others on the list. I walked calmly past the growing crowd. A young man in a hoodie stared at me, eyes wide. "Hey, were you the guy?" I didn't answer. Just kept walking. As I reached the black SUV parked at the curb, the rear window slid down. "Get in," said the familiar voice from inside. I slid into the back seat. The door locked with a quiet click behind me. The woman sitting across from me wore civilian clothes, but she had the eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading classified files in windowless rooms. "Was he what we thought?" she asked without looking up from her tablet. "Worse," I said. "He recognized me. Which means someone's been leaking." She nodded slightly, scrolling through documents on her screen. "We're pulling internal access logs now. Langley's moving up phase 2. I leaned back in my seat. What about the others? Pierce was just the start. 3 more judges. 2 city attorneys. 1 congressman. I stared out the window as we pulled away. "They won't go down easy." "No," she agreed, "but they'll go down. Especially if you stay quiet." I smiled faintly. "That part comes naturally." The SUV moved smoothly through the city, weaving past government buildings and monuments that looked pristine on the outside, but I knew better. Corruption rarely looked like chaos. It looked like polished shoes, handshake deals, and smiling portraits on courthouse walls. Judge Pierce had been just one piece of a much larger, well-insulated machine. But once a wheel comes off, the whole structure starts to shake. As we neared the secure underground garage, the woman across from me finally looked up from her tablet. "You've been requested in person," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Langley?" She shook her head. "No. D.C. Justice. Directly." That meant top brass. And that meant they were scared. "Am I being reassigned?" I asked. She hesitated. "Possibly. But right now, they want a full download. Every detail. Every conversation with Pierce. Every pattern you spotted." I leaned forward slightly. "So they're finally admitting he wasn't working alone." She tapped her screen, bringing up a list of names. Most were redacted. One wasn't. Judge Lena Ashcroft. Federal appeals. Even higher than Pierce. I whistled low. "So that's the next door." She nodded once. "You opened it today. The clock's running now. Ashcroft's going to feel the shift in the air. She'll know." I stared at the screen. Good. Because I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The elevator in the Justice Department moved slower than I remembered. Maybe it was my pulse picking up. Maybe it was the weight of what came next. I stood alone, suit pressed, hands at my sides. No badge visible, no ID displayed, just a quiet man with knowledge no one had the courage to speak out loud in public. When the doors opened, two men in dark suits flanked me wordlessly and led me down a long hallway with thick carpet and soundproofed walls. At the end, a secure conference room waited. Inside sat three people, a deputy attorney general, a DOJ inspector, and a fourth chair left open for me. The deputy gestured. "Sit." I did. The inspector slid a dossier toward me, thicker than the one on Pierce. "Judge Ashcroft," he said quietly. "We have strong circumstantial evidence of collusion with multiple political donors and buried cases linked to private prison contracts." I opened the folder. Names I'd seen before. Symbols. Transfers. Case logs quietly wiped from the system. "You want confirmation," I said. "We want a repeat of what happened today," the deputy replied. "Clean. Controlled. No media leaks until we're ready." "And if she senses it coming?" I asked. The room went quiet for a moment. "That's why we're bringing you in," the deputy finally said. "You're the only one who's already been in her courtroom, and walked out with more than she realized." I looked at the last page of the file, a schedule. Ashcroft's calendar. She had a closed hearing in 72 hours. I closed the file gently. "Then I'll need access to the same room, 3 seats back, aisle." "Why?" I looked up at them. "Because she won't recognize me until it's too late." 72 hours later, I was seated exactly where I requested, 3rd row, aisle, dressed like any other quiet observer in a federal hearing. I held no folder, no badge, no device. Just my presence. Judge Lena Ashcroft entered the courtroom 10 minutes late. Typical. She liked making people wait, reminding them she controlled the clock. She didn't see me at first. Her attention was on the attorneys presenting a sensitive appeal involving a private detention contract, the same one we traced back to falsified sentencing enhancements and profit kickbacks. She looked calm. Powerful. Untouchable. That was about to change. 15 minutes into the session, she paused mid-sentence as her eyes passed over the gallery. Her gaze landed on me, just briefly, but it was enough. A flicker. Recognition without understanding. Not who I was, but where she had seen me before. Not from TV. Not from a case. From a memory, a fleeting one. A hallway in D.C. A classified briefing 5 years ago. I hadn't spoken then either. I just stood near the wall, listening, invisible. Now I was back. And she realized she had missed something. Something big. She cleared her throat and reached for her water, but her hand trembled slightly. That was all I needed to see. The agent seated beside me leaned over. "She's tagged. We're green." I stood and walked silently out of the room. 15 minutes later, as Ashcroft exited her bench chambers for recess, 6 federal officers intercepted her. No cuffs yet. Just the quiet formality of impending collapse. By the time I reached the elevator, a message pinged my secure line. Phase 2 confirmed. Phase 3 in motion. Stand by. I pocketed the phone, expression unreadable. They had mocked the quiet ones for too long. Now the quiet was answering back. I should have felt closure. Pierce was gone. Ashcroft was falling. The machine had coughed and sputtered, gears jammed by a silent hand they never saw coming. But as I walked through the granite corridors of the department, I knew something deeper. This wasn't the end. It was just proof the infection went higher. I passed a glass door marked Oversight Liaison and paused. Inside, a man in a gray tie caught my eye, nodded once. Another marker. Another sign. The kind only a few of us would notice. By the time I reached my assigned secure room, a folder was already waiting. Not digital. Not emailed. Hand-delivered. Inside, photos, call logs, campaign finances. But this time, no judge. A senator. Reed Callahan. I exhaled slowly, reading the notes. He'd been publicly clean, too clean. Multiple bills, accidentally, delayed in committee. Donations funneled through third parties. One former whistleblower who disappeared mid-transfer. And now. He was up for a seat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. They wanted me embedded again. But this time, it wouldn't be from a courtroom bench or a gallery seat. It would be closer. Riskier. Face to face. A message at the bottom of the folder read, "You're not just the quiet man anymore. You're the last firewall." I closed the file. Looked out the narrow window. Quiet was never the goal. It was the strategy. And the war against corruption. Still very much on. That night, I walked alone past the Capitol dome. To anyone watching, I looked like a government contractor wrapping up a long day, the kind of man you forget as soon as he passes. But under the surface, everything was shifting. I had a burner phone in my pocket, preloaded with only one number. The contact name wasn't real. Nothing in this line of work ever was. I dialed. No ring. Just a click. A voice on the other end said, "Status?" "Callahan's exposed," I replied. "But not vulnerable. Not yet. We'll change that." I knew they would. There are operations run through committees, hearings, public statements. And then there are the ones no one ever hears about, the ones designed to clean rot from within, quietly and surgically, before it poisons the entire structure. That was my role now. No badge. No title. Just a trail of fallen names behind me, and a list ahead I hadn't yet dared read fully. As I crossed the intersection near the reflecting pool, a black SUV idled on the corner. Same type. Different agents. I didn't need to ask where we were going. Because I wasn't just investigating corruption anymore. I was hunting it. And the ones who thought they were above accountability, the ones who mocked, silenced, manipulated from the bench, from backrooms, from Senate floors, they would never hear me coming. But they'd feel it when I arrived. Because sometimes, the most dangerous man in the room, is the one who says nothing at all.